Stephen King is the most prolific and best-selling novelist in the world. He has written over 30 books in less than 25 years, has sold over 300, not 30, 300 million of them in 33 languages worldwide. He has his own personal Book of the Month club and ranks number 31 on the Forbes list of most lavishly paid entertainers. Almost all of his novels and novellas have been successfully adapted for television or film, including Carrie, The Shining, and Misery. After years of churning out horror stories as the grim reaper of mass-market media, he has written what he says is a grown-up novel. It is called Bag of Bones, and I am pleased to have the author, Stephen King, join me now. There it is. Before we talk about this, and you and lots of other things, two things I want to ask you about. One is, as a guy who built a field up there in a baseball park up there in your hometown, what do you think of the home run contest, and who do you hope does what?
Well, I agree with what Russell Baker said in The Observer. It's not competition, it's an exhibition. Yeah. It really doesn't have a lot to do with baseball. I'm a Red Sox fan, and we don't have a home run leader this year. We have Mo Vaughn, who's hit 37. Mark McGwire.
But you got a pretty good pitcher up there.
We got two or three pretty good pitchers. We've also got a second baseman named Donnie Sadler, who's only hit 3 home runs. But I think with a little luck, we're going to the postseason, and Mark McGwire's team isn't. I heard a guy talking on the TV and saying that basically Americans love home runs because Americans are in love with power, the concept of power. Home runs are power, but that's not what baseball is about. If you ask me to sum up baseball, I'd say either a strike 'em out, throw 'em out double play, or a suicide squeeze with a runner at third in a close game.
Granted, that kind of strategy, it makes the game very appealing to the purist. But I bet you if somebody said to you in the offseason, we can get Mark McGwire and it might win the pennant, you'd be the first one to say, how much is it going to cost?
Well, I'm not sure that that's the truth, though. I think we're probably going to lose our slugger, Mo Vaughn. But I don't think home run hitters win pennants.
But clearly they don't. The New York Yankees have no one that's in the competition, and they are having the best season in the history of baseball.
You have some people this year who've shown amazing power. Albert Bell has come on strong. He's hit 47 home runs. You've got Ken Griffey in the American League, who's hit 53. Then you've got Sosa, you've got McGwire, and of all those players, only Sammy Sosa is playing for a contender, and that's a contention for a wild card spot at that.
But I don't think that the reason the Cardinals are not a contender is because they have Mark McGwire.
No, I think that the reason that
because the Yankees won a whole bunch of pennants and World Series, and both in the era of Mantle and in the era of Ruth, and it was because they have a power lineup.
The Cards have soft pitching, and that's the problem in the major leagues right now, and that's one of the reasons that McGwire and Sosa have done what they've done. Go down the list and look who served them up, and ask how many of those names you know.
In terms of the pitchers?
In terms of the
Not
pitchers.
many.
That's right.
Is this the best you've done?
I think it is. I think it might be the best that I've done. In fact, I'm being modest because it's my tendency to be modest. I knew it was good when I was writing it, and I worked hard on it. It's a little bit different. It's got a romantic feel to it that some of the other ones don't have. And it's got buckets of plot, and I just love it. There. I said it,
I got
and
it
now
out
I
of it.
feel better.
Yeah,
That's
you
right.
do. You felt, you wanted to say...
I owe you $50 for therapy on the basis of that.
Yes, you do. You do. You owe me. You've been doing therapy for how many years?
No, well, I don't bother with therapy. I get it all out on the page. You go to the psychiatrist, you pay him $50 an hour, and it's not even a full hour. This way, people pay me millions. It is the racket of rackets, believe me. Yeah.
A great career as a writer where you can pour out all of your anxieties, all of your fears, all of your fantasy. Right here.
It is a literary version of Tom Sawyer whitewashing the fence.
All right. What makes this, in your judgment, now that you have put it out there and said, this is the best work I've done?
Well, I wanted to write something that really was romantic, and I wanted to write something that was a grown-up romance. And I chose a writer. I've written about writers before. I wanted to say one more time, this is what creativity is like. This is what writers do when they're able to transcend the bounds of reality and get over on the other side into the world where the fantasy exists. And this is what the process is like, and this is what makes it exciting, and this is the way you're able to mold reality. But I love ghost stories, and I love make-believe. And here I felt like I was able to wed what was real, what was actual, was some of the spooks and the supernatural elements that have made me happy for a long time, and apparently have made some of the readers happy as well.
It certainly has, apparently. So you create this character. Is this character your ideal novelist? Who is he, 40 what, 41?
Mike Noonan is 40 years old, and when the book starts, he has...
said goodbye to his wife.
Yeah, he's been a widower for 4 years. His wife died of a brain aneurysm, and he's able to finish the book that he's working on, and then he's afflicted with a writer's block that grows worse and worse and worse until it's a panic attack reaction, where if he even turns on his word processor and calls up the program, he has projectile vomiting and shortness of breath and palpitations. And I imagine there are critics all over America saying, "It should happen to you, King. It should happen to you."
You've never faced it.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. I've had writer's block. It's the kind of thing that I think you work through as time passes, but I think that, you know, when people say, how does creativity work? My response is it works just fine, as long as you don't examine what you're doing too closely. I think that there are certain processes, sex is one, where the more you think about it, the worse your performance becomes. Sometimes it's just best to rear back and let her rip. So I've had it, but the last time that I had it in a really serious way was when I was teaching, writing courses, and thinking about the process of writing instead of doing it. So Mike Noonan is this writer who's got writer's block, and in an effort to try and either come to terms with the writer's block or to get over his grief for his wife that he believes is causing it, he goes to a town where they have had a summer home, and he discovers a woman that he starts to fall in love with who has problems of her own, and he also discovers...
Her problems have to do with her father-in-law.
Her problems have to do with her father-in-law who wants custody of her child. And that ties into the other plot, which is the fact that Mike Noonan's house is apparently haunted by ghosts from the past.
And it's the house that he went to with
his wife.
Right.
And, you know, I've always remembered with affection the first line of Rebecca, where she says, "Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley." And it's a story about the past. All Gothic stories are stories about the past and how we hide secrets, the same way that I think that most stories about ghosts are really stories about bad conscience. They're things that come back to haunt us. There are certain politicians in Washington who could speak very well to that, who have ghosts of their own. So I think that ghost stories really serve as moral tales, and so that's sort of what I've tried to tell.
And the moral tale becomes, I mean, what's the moral?
I think the moral is you can't hide evil forever. Sooner or later, it always comes back to haunt you.
This is as contemporary as today's headlines, isn't it?
Well, I like to think that it is, but those are all things that the book is. I hope what the book does is entertain. I tried to tell a good story.
I mean, if there's one thing you don't worry about is whether you can entertain. I mean, clearly...
That's the first thing I worry about when it's me.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do.
You say to yourself, I don't care if it's... I mean, I'd like for it to be good. I'd like for it to be good. But mainly, I want to make sure it entertains.
Well, you have to, because let me see this for a minute. Now, you got your camera there, right? Okay.
Right.
This is the price on this book.
$28.
$28.
And in Canada it is $38.
$28 is a lot of money to expect somebody to spend on a book. It isn't, okay, it isn't more than you'd spend to go to a movie, you and your wife, and pay the babysitter at the same time. But the first thing that a reader has a right to expect from a novel is to enjoy it, to be taken away to another place. Now, I always think of the old line...
So then the people we should honor the most among our writers are those that do the best job of telling the best story that takes us to another place.
Well, I think you have to tell a story...
That's the way we ought to... And why don't we honor those people at the Nobel Awards?
I think a lot of times we do. You know, when you give a John Steinbeck a Nobel Prize, when you give a William Faulkner a Nobel Prize, you're...
creating remarkable characters.
Creating remarkable characters, creating remarkable stories. If you take a book like The Grapes of Wrath, for instance, by Steinbeck, you have a wonderful story of the Joads, and just incidentally, as you get into that story, maybe you start to discover some things about social issues, or maybe you start to see things from a point of view you wouldn't have seen them from otherwise. So I always think of that TV commercial about Star-Kissed tuna that used to go, we want tunas that taste good, not tunas with good taste.
I remember that. Tunas that taste good, not tunas with good taste.
When I write a book like Bag of Bones, the first thing that I say is, let's tell a good story, and if my assumption is that if I like it, if it takes me away, if I can spend 3 hours and work on it a day, and I don't know where that time went, maybe the reader will like it too, but then at some point you're supposed to stand back and look at the whole thing and say, I spent a year of my life thumping away on this book in this little room. Why did I do that? What's it about? What interested me so much?
And make sure I got that on the page.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you rather at the end of the game have people say he sold the most books, he entertained the most people, or he was simply the best novelist ever to come down the pike?
Oh, God, wouldn't it be great if they'd say that? I'd love it if they'd say that.
But,
well, okay, not everybody can be Mark McGuire, not everybody can be Sammy Sosa. I think that there are a lot of writers out there who would love to be able to say, at the end of the 20th century, which is really close now, my work ranks with the work of, let's say, some of those people we talked about, Steinbeck, Faulkner, Sherwood Anderson, F. Scott Fitzgerald. But I think the most important thing is that you take the talent that God gave you and do the best with it that you can, that you not sell it short, that you not slack off, that you not take it easy, that you just go as hard as you can all the time. And that's what I've tried to do. I'm
not trying to even go down. I wasn't even intending to go down this line, but since I don't operate from a predetermined list of questions, and I'll take it where it goes. Is there anything about, when you think of that, because you have made all the money that anybody could ever hope to make. I mean, you really
absolutely
made
I'm
a ton of money.
Yeah.
You know, and you've been able to do things with your money. You build libraries and you build ballparks and you do other things in ways that we don't even know, in which you say, I've worked my butt off. I've done something I'm proud of. America
had some
has
fun with it
me.
too. I got season tickets for the Red Sox and for the Cleveland Indians. So
the Indians
had
too?
some fun. Yeah, the Indians too.
Why the Indians?
Well, I got mad at the Red Sox a few years ago, but that's a different story. Go ahead.
We don't want to detour over there, do we?
Don't go there.
Well, what did they do? I can't resist not going there now. What did you do with the Red Sox?
We had a great manager, Joe Morgan.
Yeah.
He used to run a plow on the Mass Pike, so they called him Tollway Joe, and they basically fired him to bring in a younger man. So I got mad and said, I'm going to...
Because they fired Joe, you got PO'd.
Yeah, I got PO'd. They brought in Butch Hobson instead. And I said to my son Owen, they're building a new stadium called Jacobs Field in Cleveland, Ohio. They're going to call it the Jake. I'm going to get season tickets right down front. I can be right at the head of the line. He said, Dad, do it. But you'll be a Red Sox fan until you die, or you'll hate yourself till you die.
So you bought the tickets, and you were still a Red Sox fan.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, how painful was it a few years ago when you watched what happened with the Mets?
Nobody will ever know how painful that was who wasn't a Red Sox fan. I can remember where I was clearly on 3 historic occasions. When President Kennedy was shot, when I heard that Princess Diana of Wales was dead, and when the ball went through Buckner in 1986.
It says it right there, how much it means to you.
I couldn't get it. I was in Western Maine, where Bag of Bones, which incidentally is at bookstores everywhere now. I was in
You can
Western...
get this book now. If you walk into your bookstore and you got $28, you can get this sucker.
Hey, listen, if you go to one of those stores where they have a sticker on it, I bet you could get it for $24. But I was in Western Maine, and the radio reception was terrible, so I was still in my car, and I was ready to go in and start the celebration. It was terrible. It was terrible.
You were ready to go in, so you didn't hear it?
Oh, I heard it. I heard it. I was going to hear the final out and then go in and kiss my wife and say, the Red Sox finally did it. We're world champions.
All right, a couple of things. $28, how much of this, of the $28 that's a retail price of a book, how much of that goes to the writer?
I don't know. I've got to deal with Scribner's on that, where we split the profits pretty much down the middle. I can't remember whether they get the extra couple of percent or I do. But
Split the profits down the middle?
Pretty much.
So if every dollar comes in to the publisher, we give 50 to Steve and we take 50 for ourselves.
Wouldn't that be nice? That'd be the world of worlds, but there are expenses for, like, the publicity, the printing. I share in all the expenses, too. We've got a pretty much of a co-deal with it. Finally, I backed off from the big advances because of what you were talking about before. I don't really... An advance, historically, was an amount of money that the publisher paid to tide the writer over between the acceptance of his book and the publication of the book when the book started to earn royalties. And that was good. If you had a baby, you could get the food and you could pay the rent or whatever. But advances nowadays, and I've taken my share of huge, whopping advances, and I even earned a few of them out. But you get to a point where you say, the advance is no longer about paying the rent because I own the house. It's no longer about making the car payment because we've got 3 different cars and they're all paid for. What the advance is about at the end of the day, when it reaches the sums that a Clancy or a Grisham or a King or a Danielle Steele gets, is about me saying to the publisher, I need to have all this money because I don't believe the book can earn that much. So I drew back. I took an advance, but it was a small one, easily earned back, and said, let's split the rest down the middle, and then that way we're partners in the success of the book. And if the book isn't successful, you know, I'm a partner in that.
But you're saying you split the expenses too?
Yeah.
So you create a corporation to publish this book, sort of? I mean, a separate
Well, no, I won't. I've resisted the urge to incorporate, and sometimes if you look on the copyright page of a novel, you'll see copyright by the so-and-so corporation. But I'm not a corporation. What I am, basically, is a cottage industry. So,
boy, I'd say that.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think yours have translated to film so well? And Grisham's have too. Well, Clancy's have too. I know Danielle Steele I'm less familiar with.
Now, Danielle Steele's books have done a lot of different TV. They've been a lot of TV miniseries, and they've been varying in terms of success. I think that producers and filmmakers look for visual imagery. They look for simple stories, simple, bright stories with high conflict, but I think that they're also seduced by visual imagery. And my books are visual because I grew up on TV, I grew up on the movies, and I also grew up on Imagist poetry. There's the T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound.
People love to write about you. Look at this. I mean, this is the New Yorker. This is something else, something else. Here, Bag of Bones. This is by Christopher Lehman Hoff from the New York Times.
Yeah.
It goes, do you essentially find they get it about you, most of these people, in a sense that they somehow get it? Or what is a giant misconception about you?
I don't think that there are any giant misconceptions unless it's a misconception to refer to me as a horror novelist. I've never denied that I am that, but I've never confirmed it either. What I am is a novelist. I'm a storyteller. It's even simpler than that. I'm attracted to themes that have to do with the bizarre, sometimes with the grotesque, sometimes the suspenseful. But people who think of me as a horror novelist haven't read Bag of Bones.
Which is a Gothic love story.
Which is a Gothic love story, or The Shawshank Redemption. A lot of people don't seem to realize that that was actually, that movie was made from my story, or Stand By Me.
I know.
I write what it occurs to me to write. The rest is
You know, they also think that the reason the movie didn't do better is because of the title.
Yeah, I know, and I think that there's probably some truth to that. So if there's a problem with the reviews on this book and some of the other ones, it's that critics seem to obsess about what the book is rather than what the book does. And what the book does is to tell a story. I think it's a good one.
And why do you tell these stories, which is the one question probably you've been asked the most?
Well, a lot of the stories vary. Some of them are extremely intense and supernatural, like Pet Sematary. Yeah. And some of them are not supernatural at all, like Stand By Me or The Apt Pupil. Misery, I think, is a straight novel. It has strong elements of suspense, but, you know, I think that most literature at the bottom is a suspense story. Look at the Bible. Is God going to win or the devil? It's the ultimate suspense story. So that if I call myself,
so the ultimate story is good versus evil.
Yeah, good versus evil. Conflict
story is good versus
and
evil.
Who will triumph? Pardon me?
Who will triumph, good or evil? That's
Yeah.
the ultimate story.
The ultimate story. Maybe it's the only story. Oh, no, there's one other one. Will the guy get the girl?
Those two.
Yeah.
And you put them both in the same book.
I put them both in the same book, yeah.
A couple of questions here. This is for Naomi
Right,
Still.
right.
What is that?
Well, the second book that I ever published was a book called Salem's Lot, and it was published in 1975. Hard as it is to believe, my daughter Naomi at that time was 4, and now my daughter Naomi is 28, and so I still love her just as much, and she's a grown-up lady now, but and it seems like a lot of years. I've been in this business for a lot of years.
In the end, what is Steve...
I'm preparing to say a whole bunch of cliches like, boy, time goes by fast, doesn't it?
I just looked at this. Is this?
It's an artist's conception of a summer home called Sarah Laughs, where Mike goes back to try and rediscover
So that's the
his
artist's
ability
conception.
to write.
Having read the book,
Yeah.
this is the way he sees it.
That's the way he sees it, and that's the
Is that the way you saw it?
No, it's bigger.
It's
It's bigger. It's a big, you know,
Your place is bigger than this.
Well, in the book, Mike's place is bigger than that,
Yeah.
because I don't think you can
Well, you
have
created Mike. I mean,
Yeah, and I don't think you can have a gothic suspense story without a bigger house. Manderley can't be like a cottage. It's got to be bigger.
you wrote, so your character is a writer. Does that mean by definition it has to be part you? Or can you make some sort of bland statement like every character is part you?
Yeah, I was going to get ready to make a bland statement like every character is part me, but Mike is more me than other characters because he is a writer, and I think that the book is told in the first person, and that creates a kind of intimacy. It also creates the misconception, because it is the first person, that the writer must be the writer, that the writer character must be the actual living writer. But in fact, I've never had writer's block, and my wife is very much alive. Well, not as
you can't contradict yourself in the same interview.
All right, you caught me. You caught me. I did it. I did it.
All right.
Yeah, it's been a long time since and I've never had the sort of writer's block that Mike has. This is cataclysmic.
Yes, it's 5 years.
This is World War III.
Exactly right. I mean, well, this is tormented, soul-wrenching, pain, agony.
Harmonious Bosch.
Exactly right.
Right, yeah.
Mark Singer begins a piece in the New Yorker magazine about you saying, quote, "I'm not asking you to believe in the boys in the basement, but you do have to believe that I believe in them."
Right, right. The boys in the basement are the subconscious guys that do a lot of the work. We started to discuss where books come from, and he asked me a version of where the idea came from, Bag of Bones, and the fact is I don't remember. I can tell wonderful stories. Any writer, if somebody says to me, where do you get your ideas? I or any other writer will immediately respond by saying, well, there was this one idea that I got when, as though the specific somehow answered the question. But people seem to think that ideas come from an idea store. Sometimes people say, where do you get your ideas? I'll say Utica. There's a little used idea store. Some of them work for Poe, some of them work for Lovecraft. Right. I'm sure there's a little use left in those ideas. But actually, I was telling Mark Singer when I did this piece that I think of them as objects that are full and entire, like skeletons. I don't think of it as creative so much as archaeological. My job is to dig them out and get as much as I can whole, so that you'll know what it is when I finally get it out of the ground. And he said, you know, that sounds good, but I really don't believe it. And I said, well, obviously you have a different take on what the writing act is about, because it's real individual. I said, just believe that I believe that that's the way it works. It's like the elves and the shoemaker. They come in the night, and they dump a little more on my head, and I get up the next morning, and I write for a while, and the story marches along, and hey, I've been successful, so you have to give me my opinion.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, because, you know, the proof is in the pudding. But the ideas do come in the middle of the night, and they come bouncing around. I mean, you get up in the morning, and somehow an idea, a character has advanced between the time you went to bed and the time you got up.
I think that happens once in a while, and I also think that what happens when you sleep is your screen is refreshed. It's like by the end of the day, have you ever noticed if you leave your computer on, after a while to save energy or something, the screen darkens? Yeah. But if you move the cursor around, it immediately brightens up again. It kind of refreshes itself. I think that when you sleep, the very dreaming process, I'm just guessing now, hey, this is all just speculation, but I do think that sleeping refreshes the process. But yeah, I've had a few ideas in my sleep.
In the end, what does Stephen King want? What's the last great ambition?
Well, I think that I'd love to have another 10 productive years as a writer, and I'd love to have another 20 productive years as a husband and a father. I'd like to write some good stories, and then I'd like to stop before it turns into a kind of self-parodying exercise. Mike says in Bag of Bones a couple of times, at the end of the day, one thing that writing always does is it passes the time. And that's true. But if that was all it did, I don't want to quit writing, but I think that if I got to that point, I'd like to have the self-discipline to put the stuff in a drawer. I think I'd love it if people continued to read the books and enjoy the books, and I'd love it if I continued to enjoy writing the books, because it is a blast. You don't know. I mean, sometimes it takes off, and it's just the best thing in the world. It's like dreaming with your eyes wide open, and I feel very fortunate to be able to do that, but I'm just glad to be alive. I think I got most of what I want.
Thanks for coming. Stephen King, Bag of Bones, at your local bookstore.
Absolutely. Buy two.
Buy two of them, give one to your best friend.
Absolutely.
In some cases, give one to everybody.
To your worst enemy.
Thanks,
That's right.
Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Back in a moment. Stay with us.